What's up, everyone? We are back. It is the Dear Miss Fantasy show with your host, me, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. We are live, so welcome in to everyone that is tuning in right now. Stop by and say hi in the chat. Let me know. Drop your questions if you have them, because again, new year, new show, changing up the format a little bit here. I'm actually live on Instagram as well at the same time. So this is a little weird for me over here. So we'll be taking questions over on, not Instagram, I'm over on TikTok. So we'll be taking questions over on TikTok if I see them. And then here on YouTube as well. I think we're Instagram and we're Facebook as well on Player Profiler. So yeah, thank you for saying hi, Derek. Good to see you. It feels weird being back. I'm a little nervous because it's been a long break. It's been a long off season without the show. So bear with me. This is our first time back in months, but it is going to be fun. Again, live questions here. And, we're changing up the format a little bit because we're going to be heavily focused on questions. We're a mailbag show after all, right? I have over 15 mailbag questions. I put out a call across all of my platforms and everyone was very generous in their submissions. So we are not slouching on the questions here. Plus any questions that you guys have live. I already see some coming in right now. So that is wonderful. We'll be answering those live. I hope you guys had a fantastic offseason and great draft season. This was a fun season to draft because the first round picks, I felt like they were all hitting. There was no controversy. But then when you get to the second round, that's where you could get a little bit creative in what you're doing. So it was fun. It was a fun offseason. But we're going to jump right in here. And I'm going to start us off with a mailbag question to begin with. And I'm starting us off with the mailbag question because it is my favorite mailbag question. It is my favorite question, period, that I got. So thank you so much to Jonathan57 and a whole bunch of numbers after that. The question is, Drake London outlook for this year. Is he going to burn me as my wide receiver 2? Here at the Dear Miss Fantasy show, which is just me, by the way, we are pro Drake London, very much so. I need a hand clap sound effect here because Drake London is my guy this year. When we're looking at Drake London and the confidence that I have in him, I understand that people are somewhat concerned about this season for him. Again, when we're looking at him, this is a guy heading into his third year who has failed to reach 1,000 yards, who has only scored a total of 6 touchdowns in his first 2 years. But that wasn't his fault. It was Marcus Mariota's fault. It was Desmond Ritter's fault. It was even Taylor Heineke's fault for a little bit there. It was a rough sledding. When you have that kind of quarterbacking, there's really not much you can do with it. Despite these struggles, London has just shown elite potential. And we got to remember, he was the 8th overall pick ahead of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave with a near flawless scouting report, 99th percentile for a breakout age. Kirk Cousins in town, raising things up a little bit. Interestingly enough, we did get news of, Kyle Pitts dealing with a hamstring injury. So it sounds like not a major issue. He is expected to play. But with that said, it just kind of makes me get a little bit more excited for Drake London this week. Not a fantastic matchup here. But we're going with it. We're leaning into it here. Wide receiver 1. So excited for him. I'm going to jump over and take some questions live here. We got from Sabertooth X. QB. Oh, maybe like a little rate my team here. QB. Yeah. Rate the team. QB, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, running backs, Devon Achane, James Conner, Jahmyr Gibbs, Tyler Algier, Brian Robinson. Very deep. And Jalen Warren as well. Wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, Terry McLaurin, Xavier Worthy. Tight end, Sam Laporta, Bengals defense, Chiefs defense, kickers as well, Sanders, and Moody, Jake Moody. I give this team an A+. I love this team. Jared Goff is a value quarterback. Fantastic. Obviously waiting on him and Brock Purdy there doubling up. You were able to invest in high-end wide receivers, solid running backs. You're deep there. You should have zero issue at running back. So that's an A+ for me. I love that one. Love that one because I'm excited about Jared Goff. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very, very excited about Jared Goff this year. All the dome games, no outdoor games until we get much later in the season. Only 3 of them. Blessed and excited for him this season. Let's see. Let's take another question here. And we'll tie this one into the rankings risers. So we're going to talk rankings risers this week. And this one ties in perfectly with this mailbag question over here. From Kenji O. How concerned are you about Puka Nacua this year? Every time I say Puka Nacua, for some reason, my Siri turns on. Yeah, some people are saying that they wouldn't be surprised to see Cooper Kupp back as the wide receiver 1 for the Rams. Yeah, very, 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 very interesting situation there with Puka and Cooper Kupp. I feel like if Cooper Kupp was just a wee bit younger, he would be the wide receiver that we were drafting first. I think it's kind of more so an age issue here and worry about him coming off of that injury. But here we are starting the season, and it's Puka the ones that's dealing with the issue right here. So when I'm looking at my rankings this week, I've got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back to back. And a lot of that has to do, again, injury does play in a little bit, but most of that has to do with the matchup. I think when we're looking at Cooper Kupp this season and Puka Nacua, we got a lot of solid matchups for them, especially this week. In weeks where they have a very positive matchup, I'm okay with leaning into both of them as ranking them, right below a wide receiver 1. We'll need to see how things shake out if Cooper Kupp remains healthy for the entire season. But when we're looking at it from that perspective, I'm not concerned about Puka Nacua. But there's a reason that I wasn't really, when it came to Puka Nacua in the second round, I didn't really feel passionate about drafting him. He was right there for a while. He dropped once the injury happened just a little bit to a mid-second round pick, but for the most part, he was going right at that turn. And it was pretty concerning. The fact that we don't know the actual target distribution truly in the true upside if both receivers remain entirely healthy. Now, we do have the added caveat of the positive. Oh, wow. I'm seeing over on TikTok, someone says they got him in the 4th round, absolute steal. That is a steal for either one of them. That would be a massive steal. But yeah. When I'm looking at Puka Nacua this year, I just worry that he does not have that same kind of top 5 ceiling that we were, looking at early on last year. And borderline wide receiver 1 is perfectly fine for him. But I think where we're drafting him or where we drafted him, we were kind of drafting him at his ceiling. So I don't think there's potential for him to be a bust. But if Cooper Kupp does stay healthy, unfortunately, I think we're looking at a slight issue of him a little bit, failing to reach that ceiling there. I had one more question that I was going to do over here on Instagram, or TikTok, but actually I'll get to that in 1 second. Over here on the podcast, we are going to take a short break here. We're going to hear just a short word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Player Profiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our rookie guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. I mean, it's a great deal.
if you were drafting him in the 4th round, sorry, I think I was on mute on the podcast there for a second. But talking about HN, if you were drafting him in the 1st round, like 100% in the 1st round or 2nd round, if you were really leaning into him as one of those early round picks, it's the high risk issue for him that really was concerning. So I understand why people are very avoid HN. I feel a little bit more positively about it just because, again, when you're looking at him, it's a high upside swing and you can recover from it. You can recover from it. Make or break player, but I don't think it's a aggressively dire situation for him. We're starting him this week and we're feeling confident. I love the matchup for him this week. I really love I love that Miami Jacksonville game as a whole. Heavily leaning into Tua this week as a start. So I think we had a comment earlier from someone that they had no, they had Goff and Purdy, but anyone that's got Tua this week, and if you were a little bit concerned that Tua was going to maybe be a bit unreliable sometimes this season, this is not one of those matchups for him. So lean into Tua Tagovailoa, obviously, Miami running backs, and then on the other end there, we'll go ahead and talk about Jacksonville since I'm kind of on the subject here. Just do a little segue to that. We're talking about the opposite side there with the Jacksonville offense. One of my favorite players and one of the biggest risers this week in terms of rankings and ADP has been rising as well. It's 100% been Brian Thomas. And I will be honest on this one. I had to kind of be talked into Brian Thomas a little bit because I was very pro Christian Kirk. When he initially came over to Jacksonville that first year, was still pro Christian Kirk last year. And so heading into this year, naturally, I would be pro Christian Kirk, right? So I had to think about it for a while. I spent the entire offseason convincing myself to love Brian Thomas. And part of the issue with that is that a little bit of bad memories from our boy Terrace Marshall. So those LSU wide receiver twos. If you invested in Terrace Marshall, you might be suffering from the trauma from that and have it maybe migrating over to Brian Thomas, kind of a similar situation. But I think the talent is for real with Brian Thomas, and I think his production is going to directly translate over to exactly what Jacksonville is asking for him. And, prior to training camp, again, I was kind of back and forth on these guys with Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas. But looking at him throughout training camp and preseason, and the very small sample size in the preseason game that we had, I've grown to believe that Brian Thomas is going to be the number one target in this offense. And he just fits so perfectly into the role that they want him to play. Their offense isn't changing. There's nothing that's being adjusted here. They just want him to be Calvin Ridley. And he kind of is the perfect player to be Calvin Ridley. He fits it so well. So when we're looking at him and wondering, is this a player that I can lean into? We had a mailbag question from Jay Hatchet 21, Brian Thomas or Chase Brown. It's not even close for me. And I love Chase Brown. Don't get me wrong. I love Chase Brown, but it's not even close for me. It's Brian Thomas that I'm starting. And I have him ranked higher than I'm very much so higher than him on him than most consensus rankings. I am thinking that I'm the highest Yahoo ranker, by the way. I do my rankings on Yahoo now. So I think I'm the highest analyst over there on Brian Thomas this week in terms of rankings, leaning heavily into him. I don't think you need to wait on it to start him. You just want to go ahead and lean into it because this is the perfect matchup for it. Miami's defense has been a little suspect. They do obviously have talent in their secondary for sure, Jalen Ramsey and whatnot, but this is going to be a back and forth kind of game. And assuming that Miami is going to jump up on Jacksonville, which I think that is what's going to happen. There's a lot of points expected in this game. Jacksonville is going to have to chase points. They're going to have to throw. We're going to see volume towards Brian Thomas right off the bat. So lean into it 100%. I don't think you need to wait. There's other rookies that I'm waiting on, like a Xavier Worthy. I'm a little bit more inclined to wait on. Rome Odunze, I'm more inclined to wait on because I love Rome Odunze, but I need to see how he works into that rotation. Like, is DJ Moore going to be initially the true alpha in that offense? What kind of contributions is Keenan Allen going to make? So holding off on Rome Odunze, but and Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, and whatnot. But Brian Thomas is someone that I feel very comfortable with starting this week. I'm doing it. I'm doing it, so you should do it too. Gonna jump over here and see if we've got any questions over here in the chat. Yes, we've got some. Let me see. We've got some questions over here. Perfect. From Ozzy Black, Cooper Kupp, Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Jaden Reed, or Brian Thomas, pick 3. Perfect. I'm glad I saw that one immediately as we're sitting here on Brian Thomas. We're staying on trend. Cooper Kupp, easy, right? That one is a no-brainer for me. Rashee Rice, this is difficult, right? Because it's a bad matchup, genuinely across the board. We saw, technically speaking, there's changes obviously in both of the teams of Kansas City and Baltimore, but we saw this at the end of last season, at the end of the postseason, and it just wasn't a high firepower situation for Rashee Rice. He was fine. It wasn't a bust, so I don't think there's anything to worry about. Stable floor. He's obviously healthy, being integrated into the offense and not suspended. So therefore, we do want to start him, Rashee Rice. Fading Jaden Reed this week, I am a little bit worried. I'm not going to lie, a little bit worried about Jaden Reed, even though I do like this matchup the Packers have against Philadelphia. Nice high-scoring matchup. Love it. Even though I do love the Packers offense, I am concerned about how much volume Jaden Reed is going to see with a fully healthy Packers receiving core. I do kind of like Christian Watson this week to have some design plays. I think Matt LaFleur will design some plays and scheme things up for him. So when I'm looking at that and looking at him, I'm fading Jaden Reed. I'll miss it this week. That is perfectly fine. So that brings it down to Tank Dell and Brian Thomas. I do have to go with Tank Dell over Brian Thomas. I love Brian Thomas, but I would start Tank Dell over Brian Thomas. You're going with Kupp, Rice, and Tank Dell. We're fading Jaden Reed and love Brian Thomas, but it just, have him a little bit lower rank than Tank Dell this week. Got a YouTube comment over here. We got a couple of questions over in YouTube that we'll jump to as well. From Chris Genova. Start Pollard, Ford, or Allen? PPR. Oh, man. Pollard, Ford, or Allen. I lean towards, and the Allen is going to get me there. I'm assuming that the Allen is, I'm assuming it's Keenan Allen, and it's a flex spot there. Again, with that Chicago receiving core, I am a little wary of starting Keenan Allen this week and Rome Odunze. I'm okay with starting DJ Moore for sure. We trust him. Yeah, Keenan Allen, perfect. So oddly enough, it is Tony Pollard that I would start, and which feels weird, right? Which does feel a little bit weird because I'm very pro Tajay Spears. I do think that Tajay Spears will, over time, outperform Tony Pollard, push his way into the RB1 role there. My only issue here is that until that happens, I think that Tony Pollard is going to see fairly decent amount of work. They're going to integrate and rely on the ground game very well, especially in this matchup against Chicago. I think leaning on the run just makes a lot of sense. You've got 2 strong running backs. Why make Will Levis have to test that Chicago secondary? Got a lot of obviously strong players in there. So I lean towards going with Tony Pollard for the volume. Decent floor with obviously Jerome Ford, but we worry about the upside there. And then Keenan Allen is a little risky, so we're going Tony Pollard. Henry Odom with a question: need 1 running back and 1 wide receiver. Christian Coho, this is very pertinent here, as we were talking about the Jaguars. Christian Kirk, Deontay, Najee, and Stevenson. Najee and Stevenson are really close. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to have to check my rankings on that because off the top of my head, I cannot remember. I want to say I have Stevenson higher. Okay, that's why I can't remember, because I have Stevenson at RB23 and I have Najee Harris at RB24. That's why I can't remember which one I had higher. They are back to back there. So tiny edge to Stevenson for running back, and then wide receiver, it is Deontay for sure for me. It's a tough matchup. I don't like this matchup for Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson, unfortunately, against New Orleans. But I will say that Deontay volume should be there for Deontay. So I think he'll be the primary target in there, and volume will be enough to push him over Christian Kirk, who we're not 100% sure on in terms of what his actual pecking order is in that Jaguars offense, oddly enough. Over here on TikTok, we got some questions too. And if I miss your question, feel free to ask it again, especially over on TikTok because the comments jump and I might look away and miss it. But we've got from Cooper, my bench is Rodgers, Worthy, Jameson. Oh, wait, I think there was a first part to that. Okay, perfect. First part to it. Lamar, Mostert. Oh, we're just doing a rate my team there. Cooper, rate your team. Lamar, Mostert, Jacobs, Tyreek, Wilson, Andrews. It's stacked. I'm not even going to finish that question. That's an A+ team. That's all the A+ in the world. From Carson Schroeder, Rice, Neighbors, or Ridley. This is a very, very good question here. Ridley, I count out again just because of I like Ridley this week. He's not a complete fade for me. I don't mind flexing him this week. I believe that I am personally flexing him this week. I'm not going to lie. I got to check my lineup on that. Yes, no, I 100% am in a dynasty league. But when I'm looking at Rice versus Neighbors, that is extremely, extremely close there. I lean towards going with Neighbors by a smidge. My rankings, I have Neighbors 2 spots ahead of Rashee Rice. It is Neighbors, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice. A nice little low-end wide receiver 2 there. I feel like it's safe. I like this matchup against Minnesota. Very suspect defense for sure. But again, if I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, him and Rashee Rice, the matchup there, it's just a much better matchup for Neighbors. So I lean towards Neighbors as the guy that you start. Take the risk with Neighbors as a rookie and go ahead and start him. Question over on YouTube from Bullyface. Start McLaurin, Kirk, or Jaden Reed. That one is an easy Terry McLaurin for me. The matchup, so it's going to be easy to lean into Terry McLaurin for the vast majority of the season. And the reason for that, really, when we're looking at that Washington offense, is that the defense is terrible. It's the defense's fault. The defense is a problem, unfortunately. And because the defense is a problem, they're going to be chasing points for the vast majority of the season. As they're chasing points, we're going to have hyper targeting to Terry McLaurin. De'Ami Brown obviously looked fantastic, and yay, De'Ami Brown, love him. Hopefully he can turn into something. This would be fantastic. I don't know if anyone else is pumped. Like, comment if you're pumped of the possibility of De'Ami Brown actually turning into something. I love the thought, but in week 1, in early season, I don't know if he's going to take anything significant away from Terry McLaurin. We like the possibility of Luke McCaffrey, but really this offense is just going to lean heavy into Terry McLaurin. We already saw the connection all preseason long with Jaden Daniels. So Terry McLaurin is the one that I want to start there. I feel very comfortable with him as a wide receiver 2. Not going to lie, there's not a ton of situations where I'll probably be saying no to Terry McLaurin unless it's against high-end receivers. From Brandon Frederick, would you trade away Jaylen Warren and Devonta Smith to get Jamar? Yeah, I would do that. I would. I know that was one of the news subjects that I was going to touch on because obviously Jamar Chase is not a riser right now, unfortunately. He's at practice. Yay. I've just never bought into the possibility of him not playing. I did think it was a little bit more possible of him not playing compared to CD. CD, I was always drafting as my wide receiver 1. Like when these guys, we're not going to contract issues don't make me back away because Jonathan Taylor last year was a weird situation of him having the injury excuse. Ever since Le'Veon Bell in that situation, these guys, they're just not going to sit, to be honest. So, yeah, I would make that trade right now. If you can pounce on that, getting someone to bite on Jamar Chase. I love Devonta Smith this year for a nice little bounce back season. But I would absolutely make that trade for Jamar Chase for sure. Moving on to a couple of mailbag questions here. One of the mailbag questions that we had this week from Dynasty F Key, who is your preferred RB? He actually had 2 questions. Who is your preferred RB waiver wire pickup between Jordan Mason, Samaje Perine, and Justice Hill? I will say if Jordan Mason is still available on your waivers, I would 100% snatch him up. We know the reality of the possibility that Christian McCaffrey is coming off of a heavy, heavy usage season. And when that happens, we often get these situations where they deal with injuries or they have subpar efficiency. It happened last year with Josh Jacobs. That was the issue with him. And then, it happened before with Christian McCaffrey. So these guys, when they have high usage, I would not be shocked if Christian McCaffrey dealt with an injury. And with Elijah Mitchell out for the season, Jordan Mason stepping into that role, yeah, he absolutely, as a handcuff, needs to be rostered. And then the second part of this question was in tight end premium, better tight end and tight end premium between Kylan Granson and Theo Johnson. Kylan Granson, who is often on TikTok, oddly enough. I don't know if you guys have ever seen him and his girl. I don't know if it's his wife or not, but they're often on TikTok. But I want to buy into the possibility of Kylan Granson finally being consistently relevant as potentially the tight end one for Indianapolis with Jelani Woods being out. Obviously, there's still Mo Alley Cox. The problem with Kylan Granson is that we have been waiting years. It feels like we've been waiting years for Indianapolis to effectively utilize one tight end, and it just hasn't happened. And I don't know that it's going to happen. I would prefer to go with Theo Johnson, who seems to have a really, really strong path to early tight end one usage. And Daniel Jones obviously is an issue, right? But a tight end in that offense, Darren Waller was slated. Gosh, that pains me to bring up Darren Waller because I drafted him last year, right? So it pains me. Darren Waller last year was slated to be to be the premier target, heavily targeted by Daniel Jones. So I do think that they want to utilize a tight end and one tight end aggressively in that offense. And I love Theo Johnson's promise. So yeah, Theo Johnson is the one for sure. I drafted him in not a tight end premium league, but in a tight end premium league. I drafted him in a tight end premium league and a 2 tight end league. So I'm leaning into it. That is the one that I prefer for sure. We'll do another mailbag question here from CLJB_5. Singletary or Brian Robinson? Love Singletary this week against Minnesota. I like the matchup. And, Singletary finally starting the season as the clear RB1. When he's the RB1, he's been perfectly fine, right? Perfectly acceptable. So we are starting Singletary as the RB1 here. Let's go over here. I think I've got some what's up? We've got some hi Dan Brown. We've got some TikTok comments over here. I keep saying Instagram. We've got some TikTok comments over here from Dennis. Rate 10-man team. Josh Allen, obviously. Walker, Connor, Chase, Wilson, Bowers, Kupp, and Rice. I like that you waited on tight end here, and you obviously took advantage of a couple of things here in terms of getting really good value. I'm guessing that Chase fell in your league with people being a little bit worried, and you were able in that first round to grab both Jamar Chase and Garrett Wilson. That is stupidly ridiculous. Your wide receiver core is going to feast. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy this year, my God. So having him and Chase, you won. I like the I like the running backs that you got there. Love getting Kupp, Rice. Yeah. That's an A+ team. Shout out to Dennis. That's 100% a A+ 10-man team. Excellent work there. Not believing in the hype of the potential of Chase not playing and taking that value. Always take the value. If other people are panicking about something, always take that value. I'm going to do a mailbag question here real quick because this is actually, I've been waiting to do this one. This is one of my favorite ones from the Bearded Baby. Levis or Carr in a super flex spot. It is Levis this week. And you know what? I'm going to be answering Levis to a lot of QB2 questions and super flex questions this year. I like the possibility of a nice turnaround here for Will Levis. So you got to remember that Titans offense and the team as a whole, love Vrabel, right? But I don't think offensively he was really able to get out of that team the true potential that he could have. And I love the offseason moves that this new regime made. This, like, literally, they went out and they said, we have XYZ problems and we're going to solve them. We're going to fix our offensive line. We're going to invest in our defense. We're going to draft appropriately. We're going to sign an additional running back, and we are going to snag top value wide receiver on the market in Calvin Ridley. Oh, and we're also going to turn around and get Tyler Boyd as well. I was a little skeptical when they initially signed Tony Pollard. I was like, you're going to spend your money here? But overall, everything that they did, absolutely fantastic. So this is just a beautiful situation for Will Levis to start off his second year. You got your big wide receiver one. My God, we still have DeAndre Hopkins here, who, by the way, it seems like he is going to play, which is not odd, right? DeAndre Hopkins did that to us several weeks last year, where he was dealing with an injury, didn't practice all week, and then turned around and played. So it's not surprising that he basically sat out preseason dealing with an injury and is potentially going to be good to go here. So this is a fantastic opportunity for Levis. I don't like this matchup. I hate this matchup. Carr has the better matchup against Carolina. Defensively, they lost so much. So I think Carolina is going to be vulnerable, obviously. On the ground, they were very vulnerable last year, but through the air as well. But I'm still not starting Carr over Levis. I would prefer to lean into Levis, even though it is the tougher defensive matchup here. I'm going to jump over to some questions from YouTube. Where did I leave off here? Millie C. Another rate my team. We got Dak, Caleb. So Dak and Caleb at quarterback, at running back, Achane, Stevenson, Montgomery, Ford, and Dowdle. And Braylon Allen. I like that. Good backup. Braylon Allen is one of my favorite late round picks. If anyone is still drafting later tonight because you preferred to wait till the last minute, late round picks, love grabbing Braylon Allen. If something were to happen to Breece Hall, upside would just be absolutely ridiculous for him. Then at wide receiver on this team, there is Lamb, Kupp, Neighbors, Coleman, Johnny. I love that you leaned into youth there with Neighbors and Coleman. Tight end, Jonnu, and then kicker, Brandon Aubrey, and Bengals defense. Good streaming option top streaming option this week in the Bengals defense. But I like this team. The combination of Dak and Caleb is very intriguing. Solid running backs. Elite options at wide receiver. Your wide receiver core is going to carry you. Just play. Unfortunately, I don't believe in Jonnu Smith this year. I just don't believe in a tight end in the Miami offense. So I think you're going to have to play the waiver wire there, but there's a lot of good options. We talked about Theo Johnson earlier for tight end premium. I think, in a deeper league, if there's not a lot of options, you could lean into taking a chance with that. But there's going to be options for you to stream. So stream at tight end. This is a solid A team, in my opinion. Yeah, for comment from Del Rey, hope the Giants are good this year. We can hope. I kind of think it's kind of a tough situation there because there's a lot of solid they have to get a new quarterback, right? There's a lot of solid options in this draft that they could go with. So I don't think that they have to absolutely tank and get the first overall pick, but you do want to get your guy. So do you have a good year, or do you tank and get the wide receiver, the franchise wide receiver of your choice? Tough for the Giants there. I'm going to jump over to TikTok real quick. Take a question from Dylan. Is DK good flex this week, or should I bench him for Brian Thomas or Wicks? This one is tough because I could go back and forth on whether or not I think you could bench him for Brian Thomas, because the problem is that it's purely a matchup issue that we have here for DK Metcalf this week. Unfortunately, that matchup with the newly paid Patrick Surtain. I would still start DK over Brian Thomas. Again, it's a terrible matchup, but we have seen players still, and DK is a player who can do so. We still see players break through against even a talent like Surtain. So I would still start DK Metcalf. From XOXO. Drop Khalil Herbert for Adonai Mitchell or Jalen Polk bench. That's tough. Because I'm coming around to the possibility that Khalil Herbert is potentially in this situation. I did not feel this last year, and there was a reason for that. But when I'm looking this year, he does have the potential to be an elite handcuff. I say that it just depends on how you are at running back XO. If you are very strong at running back and you don't need to have Herbert as, a handcuff option, because I do think that DeAndre Swift is going to be the clear running back one, then yeah, I could see dropping Khalil Herbert for Adonai Mitchell. I would probably do it for Mitchell before I would Polk, although I do love Jalen Polk. But Polk, again, is someone who in deeper leagues, that's someone that is 100% sitting on my bench in like most of my dynasty leagues as well. I love the promise of him, but I would probably go with Adonai Mitchell first if I was dropping Herbert, if you have the ability to. Let's see. We got from Orsh3 over here on TikTok as well. Another rate my 10-man PPR team. We got Love. I'm a Packers fan, so love your Love pick. Jacobs, Garrett, London, McBride, Waddle, and T on the bench. It's a really nice team. I give it a B+, maybe an A. Actually, no, I do kind of like that combination of JT and Jacobs there. I'm assuming Jacobs dropped and that you went JT, Garrett, Jacobs, and then maybe London or McBride. I like this team for you. That's an A. I said B+ at first, but I the more I look at it, the more I love it. The more I love it. I like that you waited on Love there and then stacked up. So you're solid at wide receiver. Again, earlier on the live, we're talking about my boy Drake London, big Drake London believer this year, 100%. Question from, this is a good question. Question from Sabretooth X, and it's not a player question. It is when can we see the weekly waiver wire video next week? Can't wait for the top pick. This is a good question because things have changed for me a little bit this year. I still have my Dear Miss Fantasy podcast with Player Profiler, but outside of that, I am 100% with Yahoo this year. So we've still got this podcast. We're going strong, but all of my content will be on Yahoo. So if you go in my link tree, which if you go on any of my social media profiles, you can see all of my content from Yahoo. So everything will be there. And I will be doing a pickups video and I think it'll be a little bit of a shorter video, but I'll still be doing waiver wire pickups videos that'll come out on Monday. So they'll be coming out. They just won't be coming out from where I was previously with last year. It'll be through Yahoo. But just follow me on any platform and I'll make sure that you get it. I will be posting everything 100%. Thank you for the question. That's such a weird one to answer, making that transition. But it's been going good. I started with Yahoo about a month ago. Yeah, about a month ago. I got articles coming out every single week, videos coming out, live shows, podcasts. So just make sure you're following me. It'll all be there. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the support, guys. Question from, I love these rate my teams. I'm not going to lie here. Because they're all good. You know it. You're submitting them because they're good. But it's fun to look at the different combinations that everyone has from their draft. From Big O-Dog, FC, Rate My Team, Jaden Daniels, David Montgomery, Brees. Ooh, Brees and David Montgomery. Marvin Harrison Jr., Debo, Sam Laporta, DK. I like this. I assume Tin Man, I have wanted so bad. I've been very pro Jaden Daniels. I have not been able to draft him, and that's my own fault. I've been very wary of waiting to draft him, and I've always been taking a quarterback before him. But if I could, I absolutely would have waited on Daniels. I like this combination for you. I like the risk that you're taking there with Marvin Harrison. Your wide receiver room is fantastic. You also managed to get a high-end tight end and the QB1 upside of Jaden Daniels. A-team. Let's go. I love it. Jumping back to the mailbags here for a question. I think I've gotten through some of them, but not all of them here. We're going kind of fluid on the podcast today. New year, lots of questions coming in. So we're being fluid about the kind of information that we're talking here. And this is leaning very heavily question, and I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of loving it. We're going to talk about, let's jump in because we have a couple of questions here regarding, we already did the Brian Thomas one. Let's do questions regarding George Pickens. George Pickens, we had a couple of questions here for George Pickens from Soa Magic DC. Pickens versus McLaurin is the first part of the question. No. Pickens versus McLaurin versus Swift for the flick spot. I worry a little bit about Pickens this week. And I have worried about Pickens. Like, I love the talent of Pickens. I believe in Pickens as a player. I think that Russell Wilson will obviously make him better than he was last year because Russell Wilson is an improvement on Kenny Pickett. I know for a fact Russell Wilson can throw touchdowns. Kenny Pickett, unfortunately, couldn't do that. So that's a big win right there for George Pickens right off the bat. But I don't like this matchup, unfortunately. I feel like we have kind of glossed over, everybody, including me, we have glossed over the additions that Atlanta made defensively. We're all hyped up. I know I am, since I'm a Drake London truther, resident Drake London truther, greatest in the world. We're all focused on the addition of Kirk Cousins. But we've kind of glossed over the fact that Atlanta's defense was decent last year. And they clearly believe they're a win now team. And they went in there and they're scooping up vets across the board, doing whatever they can to kind of reinforce their defense. And I think it's a lot more improved than we're giving them credit for. And I fear this matchup for Pickens is going to be tough. I love my boy, AJ Terrell. And obviously Clemson. Oh, you guys can't see it. My background changed. I usually had a bunch of Clemson stuff up. But yeah, this matchup for Pickens is a little bit concerning for me. Terry McLaurin is the one who I prefer here in this volume matchup versus Tampa Bay. We talked about Jaden Daniels. Anyone, if you got Jaden Daniels 100%, lean into it. Because this is a matchup this week where I think they're 100% going to have to chase points against Tampa Bay, and volume will carry Terry McLaurin. So Terry McLaurin is the one that I would start from that grouping. Heading over and looking at some comments here over on TikTok. Again, if I miss your question, just ask it again. I'm looking back and forth across platforms. So if I miss it, I'm sorry. But ask it again. I won't get offended if you put it in the chat 5 times. From T. Posina. TS Posina, I'm saying your name so wrong too. Need help. I get Jefferson, McCaffrey, and Devontae Adams. Ooh. All right, let's pause on this. This is a big boy trade. All right. I get Jefferson, McCaffrey, and Devontae Adams. I give Tyreek, Puka, and JT. Let's break it down. Jefferson to Tyreek is a little bit of a wash. I don't like Tyreek is obviously a lot higher, but they're both first round picks. If Sam Darnold is somewhat competent, we'll still see a good season out of Justin Jefferson. So there's not a huge difference there. And then we'll compare McCaffrey to JT. Obviously, I prefer McCaffrey on that end. JT's solid, but we do kind of worry about the rushing upside and maybe touchdown vulturing of Anthony Richardson. And then Devontae and Puka, we'll pair them up. I do prefer Puka slightly, but you're not getting a massive drop off to Devontae. I think I would take this trade to upgrade to Christian McCaffrey, especially amid the concerns that Puka Nakua's ceiling might be a little capped there. I'm okay with making that trade. I will say for you, I would probably make sure that I handcuff with Jordan Mason. Just be careful. Question from Parker. Should I start Devontae Smith? And should I start Devontae Smith or Zay Flowers? Sorry, I saw Zay and got jumbled on the words. I prefer to start Devontae Smith this week, 100%. I don't think that I have talked about this Packers and Philadelphia matchup yet, but I'm a big fan. Obviously point totals, you see those right off the bat and you want to lean into it. A lot of times these international games can feel a little bit risky because the players, Philadelphia has been a little expressive about being there in Brazil. Unfortunately, I won't speak on it, but they've been a little vocal about being told to stay in the hotel. And obviously, when we have these international games, sometimes they don't meet the point totals and they're a little bit underwhelming. But I still think this one is going to pop off, right? It's Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts. They're two of my favorite quarterbacks in the league, just on a personal level. Those two right there. So I think that this is going to be a nice, high-scoring game, and I love the potential for Devontae Smith in this offense with Kellen Moore. I'm very high on this offense with Kellen Moore. He's always done us right from a fantasy perspective. Coaching, say what you want, but from a fantasy perspective, Kellen Moore has done right by us. He done right by us with CeeDee Lamb. He's done right by us with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams when he was healthy. So yeah, I'm a fan. I would start Devontae Smith over Zay Flowers this week, matchup being heavily the reason why I would do that. I'm also very high on Devontae Smith this year. On YouTube, got to rate my team, a 12 team. 12 team, full PPR. Quarterbacks are Murray and Geno Smith. Running backs are Achane, Stevenson, Najee, Hubbard, Brooks. Okay there. Corum, Rico Dowdle, and then wide receivers are CeeDee Lamb, Waddle, London, Deontay, Hollywood, and Kirk. This is interesting. You took obviously a high-end approach at wide receiver early. I'm assuming you faded tight end, which I am perfectly fine with. And that's the reason why you're so heavily stacked at wide receiver and then also still have solid running backs. I like this. Obviously, Achane is on the riskier side. Stevenson in a low-end offense, potentially one of the worst offenses in the league. But I think we'll see Drake May sooner than later. I don't know how long fans will be able to hold off sitting there watching Jacoby Brissett. Unfortunately, it'll get tiresome. And you've already got your quarterback. So I think we'll see Drake May sooner rather than later. But when we're looking at this team here, I don't mind your approach to running back. You've got Achane as the standout and then a lot of RB2s and RB3s there. But there's potential. I love Jonathan Brooks when he comes back. You probably got him at a good discount there. So this is a solid B+ here. I like this. We didn't even touch on Kyler Murray. So yeah, I like this team here. I like the approach that you took. I'd be curious what the settings are, the lineup settings are on that. If you're able to start 3 wide receivers, you probably have a massive advantage there. Going back to some mailbag questions here, because we are running a little we've had a lot of questions. We've taken a lot of questions live. If you're listening to the podcast, we take questions live here on the show all across all the social media platforms. So if you're watching or listening on the podcast, be sure to tune in sometime live. But jumping back to the mailbag questions here to kind of wrap things up as we kind of head into the last 10 minutes of the pod. From Pleasure Point Chase, would you start George Pickens or Zamir White? Again, we just talked about George Pickens, so I won't go into it too in depth. I've got those concerns regarding the matchup. I would actually start Zamir White over George Pickens this week. Another question here, making sure that I'm not missing any from Danny Ocean. What are your projections for Marvin Harrison Jr. and will T. Higgins go off this season and get the bag for next season? It's always interesting when wide receivers are in those contract years, although it's different for T because T knew he was in a contract year last year. And that's the performance that he put out. Franchise tag obviously was the reality there. But looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. here, he was my wide receiver 10 during draft season. I'm very confident with him, was very bullish with him as a early second round pick, mid second round pick at the latest. And the reason for that was it's Kyler Murray. right? When we look back at Kyler Murray in his career, I feel like sometimes we forget that Kyler Murray's we remember DeAndre Hopkins being there, right? He got one prime year from DeAndre Hopkins, and Murray was like the QB3. That was the big season, right? And then after that, Murray was dealing with injuries and got a little bit older. He never really had a full season with a prime wide receiver one. So it's been a while since we've actually seen Kyler Murray with a true alpha receiver for an entire season. So looking at that and the potential for Marvin Harrison and obviously being that initial target for Kyler Murray, I don't think that it's unrealistic to say that a top 12 finish is very much so in the reality for him. I'm very, very bullish on Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think that he will finish as a wide receiver one. With T. Higgins, unfortunately, I think we're going to be getting the same thing we got last year from him. Inconsistency. God love him. I'm a Clemson grad. I love him with all my heart, but I think we're going to be unfortunately getting the same level of inconsistency there. Hopefully, injuries have always been a concern there. I hope things turn around for him and he's able to have a strong season, but I think it'll just be your typical T. Higgins low-end wide receiver 2 season. It's all right. It gets you by. You don't mind it. You know what you're getting. I don't know if he's going to have that massive, massive top 10 breakout kind of season. Question here from, we did that one. Question here from Indy Sludge. Question here from Indy Sludge. Tony Pollard versus Zach Moss at RB1. We talked about the Titans earlier and Will Levis, Calvin Ridley, and whatnot in that matchup. I am starting Tony Pollard over Zach Moss for sure, especially in PPR here. And it's not because I'm a Chase Brown girly. That is not the reason. I do think early on, Zach Moss can see the bulk of the early down work. But Tony Pollard, I think these Titans, I kind of talked about it earlier, I think, so I won't go too much in depth. But Tony Pollard, I think the Titans here are going to heavily rely on the ground game in this matchup against Chicago. I think it'll be decently close, a lot closer than maybe people expect. Volume will be there for Tony Pollard. I love my Tajay Spears, but I think I would go with Tony Pollard over Zach Moss. I'm trusting Tony Pollard week one. I think it's his job to lose. So until he proves us wrong, we are starting Tony Pollard. Mailbag question from Ty Loves Music 721. Possible trade. Love it. Raheem Mostert and DeAndre Hopkins for Keenan Allen and Zach Moss. I can't do it. Unfortunately, I can't do it. That's not enough for me. I still prefer the Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Hopkins side. Keenan Allen and Zach Moss is not enough for me. You're making a significant downgrade there at running back from Mostert to Zach Moss. Moss, I get that we saw greatness out of him for a few weeks in relief of Jonathan Taylor last year. But the ceiling is just not the same as Raheem Mostert. So Raheem Mostert and DeAndre Hopkins, I prefer that side. From Joseph H, Standard League, Zay Flowers versus Ridley. Zay by a smidge, and it's just a matchup issue again. We talked a lot about the Titans. The Chicago defense has really, really turned around at the back half of last season. I expect it to move forward. They've made the moves that they need to make to be an elite defense this season. So I think we need to put a little bit of respect on that defense right there. So it's just a matchup issue, unfortunately, with Ridley. From Alejandro, Swift or Hubbard? Swift. We're going Swift. I love Chuba Hubbard. But again, that's a difficult matchup for him. That New Orleans defense should be tough against the run. Lean into Swift. Let's do, before we do our last mailbag questions, I'm going to go over and make sure if I missed any, let's see. I think I got all the questions over on YouTube. I think we're good to go. And, they needed to, hold on. I'm over here trying to do the live on, This is crazy. Trying to do the live over on TikTok, and they needed me to verify that I was still active to make sure that that's weird. Then to make sure, or they were going to end the live in 5 minutes. That's crazy. Thank you, TikTok. Well, I got a lot of questions over on TikTok. So I'm going to go over here and do arbitrage just for you guys and answer these questions over here because I appreciate you tuning in. From J Money, Kyler or Love. We're going Kyler this week. And that's tough, man. I love Jordan Love this week. I love the matchup, but the rushing upside for Kyler is heavy, is a lot higher. Love runs at the goal line, but with a fully healthy wide receiver core and with the addition of Josh Jacobs, I don't know if we're going to get him at the goal line as much as we did. So touchdown equity might be down a little bit. We kind of forget that Jordan Love had a ridiculous amount of touchdowns last year. That was the big reason for his success. And Josh Jacobs coming in could affect that a little bit. Kyler Murray is who we're going with this week. From Blue Pack 1914, Cut 1, Brandon Cooks, Jacoby Myers, or Marvin Mims. This one is potentially tougher than you would think because with Tim Patrick being cut, which made me angry, by the way. I was not happy about Tim Patrick being cut from the Broncos. That was a little bit foul. I was very, very excited to see Tim Patrick return from that injury, and because he's always been such a solid receiver, and for him to get cut, I was not a fan of that. That you could have made a cut, Sean Payton, from literally anywhere else. Your receiving core is not as deep as you think. That was not the move. That aside, between Brandon Cooks and Marvin Mims, I would not cut Jacoby Myers just because of the talent level. I know the quarterback situation is shaky. He probably has the shakiest quarterback situation. I do like Bo Nix more than Gardner Minshew for the potential that he has. Personally, love Gardner Minshew. But Jacoby Myers you want to keep for sure. Between Brandon Cooks and Marvin Mims, it does get interesting because Mims is young. Cooks is old. Cooks underperformed last year. It's weird because he is the wide receiver too. And I see that's such a basic breakdown of young versus old, but it's weird because he was the wide receiver 2 last year, clear wide receiver 2 in a hyped up offense. And he dealt with some injury issues, but a hyped up, very strong offense, one of the best offenses in the league. And you gave me nothing. You gave me nothing, Brandon Cooks, just as a whole. So I am worried that Cooks might be a little cooked, unfortunately. And it feels weird maybe to drop Brandon Cooks for the possibility and the promise of Marvin Mims. I would roster Cooks and just cross my fingers, but give it a week. Give it a week or two to kind of see what Cooks' role in this offense is going to be, and if he bounces back a little bit or if he struggles. I feel like if you drop Mims, he'll be there. I think Mims is more of a project to maybe come on later in the season. So drop Mims. I think he'll still be there. If you drop Cooks, someone will pick him up. From Dan Rags Z. Ooh, good question here. I like this. Cleveland defense or the Dallas defense? This is tough because they're both strong defenses, right? I'm going to go to my rankings because off the top of my head, I can never remember rankings for defenses off the top of my head unless they're a clear standout. It is, it's Dallas's defense that I have ranked higher. Cleveland's defense is still a top 10 defense for me, but Dallas's defense is the one that I have a few spots higher. Again, it's Deshaun Watson. He could throw some interceptions. It's Deshaun Watson. So Dallas defense is the one that we would start this week. From Jay Santiago, we're going to go one more minute here with questions. If you have any questions over on YouTube, get them in now. From Jay Santiago, bench 1, Ayuk, Rice, Devonta Smith, Hurts is your quarterback. Yeah, I would really want to have that Hurts, Devonta Smith stack this week for sure in this matchup. And between Ayuk and Rice, I do have Ayuk higher. And that one is tough. That one is tough because Ayuk is in that terrible, terrible matchup with a very solid secondary over there for the Jets. I would still start Ayuk just because I do feel like he is the type of player that can still perform in a bad matchup. Rice is a safe option, but I don't think you have a lot of upside with him. I would bench Rice. And then Jackson, Tank Dell or Christian Kirk in flex. We are leaning into Tank Dell. Tank Dell is the one that we would start over Christian Kirk in flex. I talked a little bit about Brian Thomas and how I prefer Brian Thomas this year, and even this week in particular as well. And I know it's risky with the Texans wide receivers trying to figure out who is going to be the alpha in that offense. But CJ absolutely loves Tank Dell. I don't think that Tank Dell will have the highest snap count between the three receivers, but the big boom potential is there for him on a weekly basis. We will do one more mailbag question here. I like the vibe of this. In the comments of the YouTube video after the show, or just tag me or something, drop the comments and let me know if you like the vibe of us being heavily question based, because it's a little bit different from last year. I would have a lot of soliloquies sometimes going and talking about players, but really just so many questions that kind of leaned into those this week. So drop the comments after the show. Let me know if you like the vibe and want the heavy questions to continue. But one last mailbag question from Brennan. DK, James Conner, or Raheem Mostert at flex. This one challenged me. I'm not going to lie. DK was for sure not going to be the one that I was starting in the flex between James Conner and Mostert. I love this matchup for Miami. I wanted to say Mostert so bad, but it is Conner that I have higher ranked. As long as Conner is healthy, we start James Conner. Healthy James Conner, golden. And then I did see one more question. Awesome. Thank you, Sabertooth X. Wonderful. Letting me know that the vibes are high. And then I saw one more question on YouTube from Joey Yachts. Love your thoughts. Oh, this is perfect. I kind of did this one right now on starting. Let's see. Love your thoughts on starting Neighbors versus Metcalf. I would start Neighbors over Metcalf. I know, and I've been very pro rookie wide receiver in this show. We're pro Marvin Harrison. We're pro Malik Neighbors. We are pro Brian Thomas. I am starting Neighbors over Metcalf. Again, it's purely a matchup issue. Metcalf is going to have to deal with Patrick Surtain. It's a lot to overcome. It's not a complete fade because he is DK Metcalf. But Neighbors just has the far better matchup. The volume should be there. We saw, Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones, right? He's gonna falter, he's gonna flail. But at the very least, we did see that no matter how off Daniel Jones threw it, Malik Neighbors was going up and getting it. So I expect Malik Neighbors to thrive on the volume there. I have Neighbors over Metcalf. All right, guys, that wraps things up. I greatly appreciate you all tuning in. Fantastic questions. This was wonderful. I again love all the comments here and love the chat. Again, if you are watching or listening on the podcast, try to tune in live sometime. We'd be very, very welcome to have you. But that's it. That wraps things up. As a reminder, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. On all platforms, if you're not already subscribed, make sure that you are also subscribed to Player Profiler. And if you're in the mood for more subscriptions and more follows, you can follow me and subscribe to me at literally anywhere at It's Tera Time. I'm at It's Tera Time over here on TikTok. Make sure that you follow me, get those notifications when I go live. I'll be going live every single week over here. So that would be awesome and greatly appreciated. Regular videos as well. You can find me on at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME on YouTube. I've got YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, pretty much anywhere. Again, that is it. That wraps things up. I appreciate you all tuning in. Good luck with your lineups. I will see you again next week.